must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
The answers to some questions may be blowing in the wind, but if you're wondering whether the people that write this show are hippies from the 60s and 70s, then clearly the answer is yes. But also, the answers to other questions are easily available, provided you're consulting the right resource. Some of the most important questions older Americans have are about their retirement. And today, we're going to answer several questions from viewers just like you. It's that time again, time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies in new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional style investing to your portfolio. If you're a regular viewer, you know my top priority as a financial advisor, and in virtually everything I do, is education. I believe it's crucial for every American to have a basic understanding of things like economics, interest rates, investing, and basics about the financial markets. Having that understanding is so important at every stage of adulthood, but it becomes increasingly important as you near retirement. That's why when you face critical questions about things like Social Security, pensions, required minimum distributions, and how to turn your savings into a reliable income stream, it can be extremely overwhelming if you don't know where to turn. Thankfully, today, you've come to the right place. So what specifically are some of the most common questions retirees and near retirees have about these issues? Well, we're going to identify and answer some of them today, and we'll be answering several questions straight from you, our loyal viewers. First, let's tackle a few of the biggest questions about retirement planning. Common question number one: how much savings do I need to retire? Now, as I've noted before on the show, the idea that there's one magic lump sum number that everyone needs to hit, or that you specifically need to hit, is largely a misconception. The more you can manage to save, of course, the better. But whether you've saved $1 million, $500,000, or $10 million, that's actually less important than the following question: is my asset allocation right for retirement? Why? Because there are hidden dangers in having a very large and supposedly comfortable savings, just as there are potential dangers in having a smaller nest egg. One of the most common of these hidden dangers is complacency, and the belief that reducing your financial risk is actually less important because you can afford to take a big loss. That may be true in certain situations, but certainly not all. So just think of all the stories you've read about millionaire celebrities who manage to lose their entire fortunes. It can happen. Focusing too much on your lump sum can be dangerous because it's based on the idea that you need a big enough pile of money to last for 30 years because you're going to start spending it down when you retire. But that's exactly the wrong way to think about retirement planning. As I explain in my book, The Retirement Income Story, if the goal of your working years is to build up a certain size nest egg, then the goal of our retirement years should not be to start spending it, but instead to never let it shrink. How is that possible? By understanding that total return is a sum of both income and growth, and that shifting your investment focus from growth to income as retirement nears is critically important. By investing for income, the money you need for your retirement expenses and goals doesn't have to come out of your principal. Instead, it can come entirely from the income you generate in the form of interest and dividends from secure investments. Now, let's take a question from one of our viewers.
Hey, I'm Michael. I'm 59 years old. I'm from Florida, married. And, I've got a 401k. My wife has a 401k, and we're, saving for retirement. And we were told, by a few different people that, you need to save 3 months, 6 months, 9 months of expenses. And we're trying to figure out, which one it is. And then once you have that saved, then what do you do? IRAs, like I say, we've got 401ks, but you go into the market. Exactly. I just need a little bit of advice on that, if you would, Dave.
Hey, Michael, thanks for your question. Actually, there are two questions wrapped up into one. So the first one, I'll say, has to do with emergency money. How much emergency money should you have set aside? And as you said, the answer is anywhere between 3 months and actually 12 months of personal expenses, really depending upon your situation. So I would say if you're self-employed, sometimes people want to have a little bit more if their income is more volatile, a little less if their income is steady. If you work at a company where you feel like you've got some good job security there, then maybe you can have 3 or 6 months and you don't have to worry about the 9 or 12 months worth of living expenses for an emergency fund. But you know, if you have 6 and all of a sudden there's some talk about your company about possible layoffs, or you just are reading the tea leaves that maybe your company isn't doing as well as it was, then maybe you want to start building that up toward 9 or 12 months. Because if you get laid off, unemployment typically doesn't replace all of your income. And as a result, you want to have enough cushion behind you in order to be able to help make it as long as possible. So you're not forced to go out and take any old job just because you need a job. Instead, you can pick the position that's really right for you, right for your skill set. So the second question then has to be with, okay, how I invest my retirement money after I set up that emergency fund. And I'm going to assume that you're talking specifically, because you're watching the income generation, specifically about retirement planning. How do you invest it for retirement? Because if this isn't retirement money, if this is money because you still have children that are possibly going to college, or maybe you want to pay for college for grandchildren, or you want to buy a vacation home, then you don't want to deal with IRAs or 401ks or anything like that as a general rule. Those types of accounts are exclusively for retirement dollars. If it's non-retirement goals you're trying to fund, then yes, you want to look toward other types of accounts. But assuming it's retirement, 401ks are usually a great option. I tell people you almost always want to maximize the level to which your company is matching you, but don't necessarily stop there. Too many people stop there, and the reality of it is that you're getting a match. Uncle Sam is matching your contribution, even beyond the corporate match, because it's pre-tax dollars. So even if you're only in the 12% bracket, that means for every 88 cents that you put in, you're getting a whole dollar put in your plan, because essentially the government is deferring 12 cents of tax. So 401ks could be great. Now, if you can deduct an IRA and you don't like the investment options in your 401k, then you could do an IRA alternatively. But remember, there are limits to contributions on IRAs that you don't have in 401ks. Now, or I should say the limits to 401ks are actually higher than IRAs themselves. If you're in a really low tax bracket, have reason to believe you're going to be in a higher tax bracket, then maybe you want to consider a Roth IRA. So I hope that answered your question sufficiently, but I want to take some time to really thank you, Michael, for being a loyal viewer.
David J. Scranton's groundbreaking new book, The Retirement Income Story, will revolutionize the way baby boomers and their advisors plan and save for retirement. The Retirement Income Story, the story behind the launch of the Retirement Income Store, is about to shatter many of the myths Wall Street bankers have promoted and protected for decades. David outlines what he believes to be a much better method for planning and saving for retirement, one that doesn't involve taking on more stock market risk. In fact, most will be able to reduce and/or possibly even eliminate stock market risk while creating renewable streams of income they can count on well into their retirement years. The simple truth is that if you were born in 1968 or sooner, you can't afford to ride out another catastrophic stock market drop like the ones in 2000 and 2007. Read The Retirement Income Story and revolutionize the way you plan and save for retirement.
Now let's tackle common question number 2. What can I do about all my debt as retirement gets closer? This is a common question because more Americans than ever before are struggling with debt as they approach or near retirement. For some of them, it may pose a real threat to their retirement goals, but that doesn't have to be the case. So the first thing you can do is simply make a priority of paying down your debt and of avoiding new debt. In particular, make a point of paying off any high interest rate credit cards before further funding your retirement accounts. Unless, of course, it's a 401k where the employer actually matches your contribution. Secondly, if you don't have a budget, make one and stick to it. Make sure especially to set tight dollar limits on entertainment, food, clothing, and things you may want but maybe don't really need. Next, if it's an issue for you, stop financially supporting your adult children. If your grown children need financial help, let them be the ones to take on the debt. They have more time to pay it off through income than you do. Another step that can help is to downsize. Most retirees tend to do this anyway, but try doing it in such a way that you end up with a savings or a windfall that can help you pay off your debts. Another step you can take is to consider debt consolidation, but be aware that payment plans typically come with strict stipulations, so it's important to be sure that you'll be able to meet them. And finally, I believe your odds of reducing your debt burden as you near retirement are greatly increased if you enlist the help of an advisor, one who specializes in retirement planning as soon as possible. Financial experts have predicted that the next major recession could happen as early as this year. What would you do if it took half of your retirement savings with it? I'm David Scranton, founder of Sound Income Strategies. And there is a safer way, investing for income. By focusing primarily on non-stock market income-generating investments, you could significantly reduce the impacts of the next major recession. Visit the Retirement Income Store at soundincomestrategies.com to connect with an income specialist who can help you get started to an income-based retirement plan.
The road to retirement is filled with twists and turns, and life's unexpected detours could easily throw you off course. That's why it's essential to work with a financial advisor who is also a fiduciary experienced in helping clients navigate the complexities of retirement planning while helping you pay yourself first. The road to retirement now made simple. To learn more, visit theretirementincomeStore.com.
If you're not using someone who's well trained in fixed income and you're born before 1966, it may just be time for you to break up with that advisor and move on. I would suggest someone who will care for you through these important years of your life. If you need help finding someone, call or write us. I'd also like to remind you of the special report entitled The Income Generation. This is available free to you, our loyal viewers, online. If you haven't downloaded your report, pick it up after the show. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation. Again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. Another common question I often get as a financial advisor is, how much can I really rely on Social Security? Now, for the majority of Americans, Social Security is actually an essential part of their financial future and one of the biggest items on their balance sheet, essentially. Everyone knows the Social Security system itself needs fixing at the federal level in order to remain solvent. But the good news is that there are enough reserves in the system right now that'll be able to pay 100% of the benefits promised through the year 2034, and 80% of benefits beyond those based upon current projections. And what's more, there's currently a reform bill on the table in Washington that proposes changes designed to extend Social Security solvency well into the next century. The most important thing to keep in mind when it comes to Social Security is that even at 100% payouts, for most people, Social Security simply won't be enough to meet their retirement goals, or even retire at all comfortably for that matter. And that's why, as we've discussed many times, it's essential to consider your benefits in relation to all your other retirement resources, including pensions, IRAs, 401ks, and so on. When seen and managed in this context, Social Security can serve as the foundation of your retirement strategy because it's exactly what its name implies, a secure source of income that you can count on for life. The trick, of course, is to allocate your other assets in a way that basically makes them look similar, turns them into a secure source of income that you can rely on to meet your goals for up to 30 years or more of retirement. Now let's tackle common question number 4. When should I start preparing for RMDs, required minimum distributions? Now, if you're a regular viewer, you probably know that we recently devoted an entire show on talking about RMDs. And it wasn't our first. The topic is that important. And the simple answer to this question is right now. Too many people put off preparing for the impact of these RMDs until shortly before they kick in, which currently is age 70 and a half. That's when the government requires you to start taking annual withdrawals from your retirement accounts and to pay taxes on these withdrawals. The withdrawals start at 3.7% of your account balance, and they increase each year as you get older. The sooner you start preparing for the impact of RMDs, the better your chances of being able to satisfy them in the most financially efficient way possible. And that's why I believe it's best to get a qualified financial advisor involved in the process as early as possible, and preferably one who specializes in retirement income. As I explained on our recent RMD show, an advisor who specializes in income can help you make sure that you have an asset allocation that allows you to satisfy these RMDs without cannibalizing your nest egg, which is one of the most common and costly mistakes that retirees make with their money. This means an asset allocation able to generate at least 3.7%, preferably 4% or more in dividend or interest in the form of income. Which brings us back to this formula, because again, I'm not talking about total return, I'm talking about satisfying your RMDs through the interest and dividend component of total return, which comes from investing for income instead of growth. Now let's take another question from one of our viewers.
Hi, my name is Judy Arrigo. I'm 68 years old. I come to Pompano as a snowbird, and I had a question regarding a IRA that my husband will be taking out. He's turning 70 in April, so we have to start releasing the funds. And I'm looking for the biggest bang for the buck on what we can get from that money.
First, Judy, thanks so much for your question and for being a loyal viewer. I guess I could answer that in two ways. One, from a tax perspective, and then again, from an investment perspective. First, in terms of taxes. There's only really one way to avoid the taxes on your husband's required minimum distributions, and that is if you're charitably inclined. You can actually send that required minimum distribution directly to a qualified charity, and therefore that RMD is not taxable. Now, I wouldn't recommend you do that unless you're charitably inclined. Don't do it just to avoid the taxes. That wouldn't make any sense. But let's say you're already giving some money to charity, be it to church or to wherever, and just taking money out of savings or out of income to do it. Well, maybe next year, with your husband's RMD approaching, you can just give a little bit less to charity out of that account, and alternatively, give that RMD to charity. And that can help you from a tax perspective right in that year. Now, how about the future with taxes? Well, if you're in a low enough tax bracket, you can do some Roth IRA conversions. Actually convert some each year in addition to the RMD. You can't convert your RMD to a Roth IRA, but you can convert a little extra. This is often done especially if somebody's only in the 12% tax bracket, which based on today's tax laws for a married couple filing jointly is all the way up to about $100,000 of income. So if after taking your RMD and all your other income sources, you still have some income left in one of those lower brackets, then it might very well make sense for you to go ahead and take a Roth conversion each year to stay under that threshold, essentially lowering your required minimum distributions and therefore the taxes due in every subsequent year. So that's the tax portion. But how about the investments? Again, the single most important thing you can do to protect your money is to focus on making sure those RMDs come out of interest and dividends and aren't coming out of principal. You know, sometimes people will say to me, Dave, I'd like to know what to do with these distributions. I wouldn't take them if I didn't need them. So I'd like to take those minimum distributions every year and invest those in a way that makes sense. Well, whereas it's good to think about that, what's more important than protecting the 3.7% required minimum distribution and growing it effectively is what you do with the entire IRA to make sure that the RMDs don't force you to take principal from that IRA. That's more important than just how to invest the RMD itself. So again, I can't stress enough that it's essential to make sure you're earning at least a 4% interest or dividend payment, so you're not taking the RMD out of principal. And then you don't have to worry about this whole thing we always talk about in the show called reverse dollar cost averaging. Lastly, what do you do with the RMD? Well, it really depends upon your goals. Some people say to me, I'd rather have my children and grandchildren enjoy the money now while I'm healthy, and I can see them enjoy it versus waiting till I'm gone and they read my will and, oh gosh, they get all this money. So if that's your philosophy and you don't need the money, well, it's great to give it to your loved ones and help them out in some important way. Maybe it could be used to pay for college for grandchildren, for example. But what if your children are doing well? A lot of clients I talk to today actually say, my kids are making more money than I ever did. Well, if that's the case, and gifting them a little extra really won't make a difference, then have you ever thought about life insurance policy? What a lot of people do when they approach retirement, or approach RMDs, is if they're still healthy enough to qualify, they'll get a life insurance policy, and they'll use these required minimum distributions to pay the premiums on that life insurance policy, essentially leveraging their estate and having a huge tax-free death benefit for their children and for their grandchildren with money that the government forced to take, but they really didn't want to spend anyway. So again, Judy, thanks so much for your question, and thanks again for being a loyal viewer to the Income Generation.
Would you take your grandchildren out for ice cream and try to pay for it using your stock certificates? No, that would be ridiculous. Instead, you would use your income. So why then do so many retirees make one of the biggest financial mistakes, dipping into their savings instead of relying on income during retirement? The good news? It's completely avoidable. To learn more, visit theretirementincomeStore.com. After a certain age, you shouldn't be overexposed to stock market risk. Yet, you might still be trying to squeeze every last drop out of today's market. And although fixed income investment can offer less risk than stocks, it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice return. In fact, recently some fixed income investments have actually outperformed stocks. But yet, you're still waiting to act. Visit theretirementincomeStore.com today to regain control of your retirement.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow the Income Generation Show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.
Another common question many people struggle with is simply, when should I retire? And obviously no one but you can really answer that question. But the right advisor can help you make sure you consider all the factors you need to in order to answer it correctly. Culturally, we're programmed to think of 65 as the normal age for retirement, but in reality, many people retire much earlier than that and some much later. It depends upon you and your individual situation, and it's not strictly a financial decision. For many people, an even more important factor is their relationship with work. Some people love their jobs and just simply couldn't imagine being fulfilled by anything else. If you're still feeling that way at 65 or even 70, you're probably not quite ready to retire yet, regardless of your financial situation. On the other hand, if your job has become a grind, but you're only looking forward to retirement to get away from that particular job, then you might also not be ready to retire quite yet, regardless of your financial situation. Truth is, sometimes the devil you don't know can be worse than the devil you do know. I've seen people retire too soon and end up wasting away in front of the television. They thought they were ready, and financially they were, but psychologically they really weren't. That's one reason I always stress that the process of preparing for retirement which includes deciding when to retire, really starts with identifying your retirement goals. We'll talk more about that coming up in just a bit. But right now, let's take another question from one of our viewers.
My name's Joanne. I'm 60 and my husband is 61. I do have a 401k with about 140,000. I have a retirement with MetLife for about 52,000. I do match what they put into my retirement for 5%. This past year, I had some unexpected expenses and spent about $20,000 that we had in savings. So I'm wondering what it is that I could do to maximize my retirement so I can retire in 2 years.
Well, Joanne, first of all, thank you very much for your question and for being a loyal viewer. I guess at this point, you're on the final stretch. If you're 2 years out, you really need to get your ducks in a row in terms of figuring out how much income you think you'll need in order to retire. So that's the first step. How much income do you need in order to retire? And on previous shows, we've talked about that a lot, where I've talked about doing a top-down budget analysis and so on. You can always go back to our show website and pull up one of our previous shows so you get the kind of the manual how to do that step by step. Then you need to go to Social Security Administration and find out how much you're likely to get from Social Security 2 years from now, and also how much you'll get at a later date if you can somehow live off other savings and postpone Social Security for a bit. And that'll tell you what your deficit is, right? I'm getting this much in Social Security, but I need that much in income. Subtract one from the other. The rest has to come from investments. Now, if you're perfectly allocated, and like we always say, that means investing for income, interest and dividends instead of growth. That means that you can get 4, maybe 4.5% of your lump sum balance if you're invested properly as income. So let's say you retire and you have $250,000. 4.5% would be about $10,000 or $11,000 at that time of income from the investments. So then you have to look in the mirror and say, well, between Social Security and that $10,000 or $11,000, can I retire on that? If the answer is no, then you have to think about saving more, if you can do it more aggressively over the next 2 years. You have to think about the possibility of downsizing. We had a show recently where we talked about different ways that people downsize or different ways that people work part-time in retirement. So again, you can always go to our show website and you can look at some of those previous shows and pull out and watch that to get some great ideas. But you might be fortunate, you might do the math, you might look at it and say between Social Security, between the $10,000 or $11,000 on my money, assuming that it grows to $250,000 over the next couple of years with contributions, I'm fine, I can retire on that. And if that's the case, then you just need to stick to your plan and work it. If it's not, then obviously you need to make some common sense adjustments along the way. And of course, we're always here to help you in any way that we can. So again, thanks so much, Joanne, for being such a loyal viewer, and thanks for your question.
Sometimes life feels like it's all about waiting in lines. Lines with no end in sight. Lines you can't do anything about. So are you tired of waiting and want to start doing? If your financial advisor has you at the back of the line, the Retirement Income Store is waiting to put you up front. Our national network of retirement income specialists will give you the individualized attention that you deserve, so you can stop waiting and start doing. The Retirement Income Store, where retirees go for income.
I want to spend just a few more minutes talking about retirement goals and why identifying them is such a vital first step in the retirement planning process, which includes answering that all-important question, when should I retire? So let's say, for example, your goals include buying a boat and sailing it around the world. Once you've identified that goal, you now have something specific to help you gauge your readiness. You know you need to have enough money to make the purchase and to fund the trip. You also know you have to be physically capable and mentally prepared. By the same token, if your goals are to spend your days playing golf, traveling, and spending time with your grandchildren, those goals also give you a readiness gauge. And once you feel that you've identified goals that are really going to fill the void emotionally, psychologically, after you stop working, then you've made a huge step toward being able to answer the question, when should I retire? Now you can start working to determine whether you're financially prepared. In other words, whether you'll have sufficient income to meet your goals without spending down your savings. Trying to make that determination without the help of a qualified professional is risky for most people because there are just too many complex variables to consider. A few of them, like required minimum distributions, Social Security, debt, all that we've talked about today. Others, though, include inflation, healthcare costs, estate planning, income taxes, and the list goes on. Bottom line is that the right advisor can help you create a plan that looks at all the relevant factors and ensures that you have income to meet your goals regardless of market conditions. Now, let's take another question from one of our viewers.
I'm Cindy. I'm 60 years old. I just want to say, David, I love your show. I'm an avid fan. And my retirement question to you is, I'm a small business owner. I have a small retirement. Is there a formula that I need to implement in my business to save for retirement?
First of all, Cindy, thanks so much for your kind words. I very much appreciate the compliment. Being a small business owner really doesn't change retirement planning a ton, except that it makes it more difficult because now you don't have an employer to come in and to put a 401k plan in or to match it dollar for dollar up to 5 or 6%. You have to do all this yourself. So your tax bracket determines whether you want to put money in pre-tax or after-tax in large part. So if you're in a high enough tax bracket, you want to put money in pre-tax. Of course, you can make an IRA contribution, but an IRA doesn't allow you to put that much away. It has limits depending upon age. So what a lot of self-employed individuals do is they'll put in some type of pension plan or simplified pension plan for work. They'll either put in a SEP plan, an SEP plan, or they'll put in a simple plan if they have employees and want to include the employees. Or if they want to put away more, they'll put in other types of pension plans. I know some people who at age 60 or so put a pension plan in for their company and they're making a ton of money, so they have to be able to afford to do what I'm about to say, but they can actually put away a couple $100,000 a year pre-tax for themselves because they're making $500,000 a year, so they can afford to put that $200 away. And with getting to a full-blown pension plan as being self-employed, they can actually do that. So again, it's really just about saving and getting the money put away first and foremost, investing it in the most prudent way. If you don't think you're going to retire for more than 10 years, you could be a little more growth-oriented. If you feel like you will retire, leave the business within 10 years, then you want to be more income-based, investing for the I instead of the G. But again, the whole self-employed thing is a double-edged sword. It's a negative because you have to do it all yourself, but it's a positive because if you're making a lot of income, you can put these advanced types of plans in which allow you to contribute a lot more money on a pre-tax basis. So Cindy, I hope that answers your question. Again, thanks so much, and thanks for being such a valued viewer of our show.
Visit theRetirementIncomeStore.com today to find out how you can rescue your retirement.
At this point, I'd like to offer a little disclaimer. As an advisor who specializes in what I like to call the universe of non-stock market income generating financial strategies, the answers I provided to the questions we've discussed today are probably a bit different from what you might hear from a more conventional financial advisor. By conventional, I mean an advisor whose business model is built primarily around stocks and mutual funds. That is, growth-based strategies that are far more typical in the financial industry. I myself had just such a typical business model when I first started my career in the 1980s and 90s. In fact, at that time, investing for growth seemed to be a slightly less risky approach because the stock market was in the middle of its greatest long-term secular bull market in history. But as regular viewers have heard me explain many times, that all changed in the year 2000 when the dot-com bubble burst and a new long-term secular bear market cycle began. Anticipating that change, I switched my business model to one more suited to the times, and ultimately one more appropriate for investors over the age of 50, regardless of market trends. How so? Well, as I've also explained before, it's all based on the simple concept that when it comes to investing, everyone really wants the same thing, and that's maximum return with minimum risk. But after the age of 50 or so, that simple guideline isn't enough. At that age, it becomes critical to ask yourself maximum return for what eventual purpose? And there are only three possible answers. One is for the purpose of ultimately making a lump sum purchase. Two, for leaving a legacy. Or three, to provide income to meet your retirement goals and needs. In my experience, most people, once they really think about it, quickly realize that they are in fact seeking maximum return with minimum risk for retirement income. And this at least is with a majority of their money. And once they realize this, many also quickly start to understand the inherent logic of investing directly for income instead of crossing your fingers and toes and hoping for growth. Those who don't are often under the common misconception that in order to increase your return and grow your money, you must increase your investment risk. They haven't yet learned that when you adopt the income model, the exact opposite is true. When you shift your strategic focus from growth to income, as I like to say from the G to the I, then you're typically investing in tools and strategies designed to protect your principal from market volatility and from the risk of spend down, all while generating reliable income through interest and dividends at competitive rates. In other words, shifting your focus toward increasing your income actually requires reducing your investment risk, not increasing it. Now here's one more disclaimer. This concept is simple, but the execution can be highly specialized, unlike those more common and conventional approaches. And that's exactly why I launched the Retirement Income Store, to give investors over the age of 50 easy access to the growing ranks of advisors nationwide who also specialize in income-based financial strategies. Now it's time to bring in Eddie Ghabour, co-owner of Key Advisors Group in Delaware. He's also the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Common Sense Bull. Eddie's a good friend of mine and a regular here on The Income Generation, but I'm sure you've also seen him recently on television networks like Fox Business, CNBC, Fox News, and so on. Eddie, thanks so much for being part of our show today.
Thank you for having me, Dave. It's always a pleasure.
So you heard some of our viewers that called in with questions that they had for me. But what are the two major questions that you get from people in Delaware that either look you up or come to one of your workshops and come in to see you?
You know, two of the main questions I get, first off, is one that I know you've gotten a million times in your career, is how much money do I need to be able to comfortably retire? And the second question is, as I get to retirement, how much risk should I take with my portfolio? Those are really some of the most common questions that we get here on a weekly basis when we're meeting with new potential clients that we're interviewing. And look, as you well know, the answer to those two questions are not just a blanket answer for everybody. It really depends upon their situation. You know, your lifestyle has everything to do with how much money an individual needs in regards to retiring, because some have a much higher standard of living in regards to how much they spend versus others. So that needs to be analyzed on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, I'm sure if you're like me, you've had people that have retired too early and didn't really envision what retirement would look like, so they kind of just rotted away in front of the television set. Conversely, you probably had people who put their plan together nicely. They went into retirement, they started executing the plan, and they never looked back again. I'm sure it goes both ways.
That's exactly right. And that's why we tell people, as you're approaching retirement, you need to start thinking about your life plan. What are you going to do with your time? Because until you know the answer to that, you really don't know how much money you truly need to be able to live the lifestyle you want.
I said that one person who was calling and looking to retire in 2 years, I said, you have to get to it. It's 2 years. You have to build that plan and see what that's going to look like. So we're going to take a commercial break in just a moment, Eddie and I. When you come back, I want to talk to you about the market right now. And to what extent the market is appropriate for people approaching retirement and to what extent the market's not appropriate. And I want to ask you in general, but I also want to ask you right now, given where financial markets are today. So Eddie, please stay with us for another segment of the show. And you stay with us too. We'll be right back here with more right here on The Income Generation in just a moment. Now it's time to bring back in, literally, my good friend, Eddie Ghabour, co-owner of Key Advisor Group in Delaware and best-selling author of the book Common Sense Bull. Eddie, thanks for sticking around.
Absolutely.
In the stock market, in general, Okay, I'm, let's say, within 10 years of retirement. I mean, I'm not, but let's say I were. What do you tell me about how much money I should and shouldn't have in the stock market if I'm that close? I'm not quite there yet, but I'm getting close.
So obviously, again, it's really going to be on a client-by-client basis because some clients have guaranteed income coming in from other sources, so they may be able to take a little bit more risk. If someone's depending solely on their portfolio, we really have a rule of thumb here that you need to start dialing back the risk in the equity markets. And I don't care whether it's a bull or bear market, you need to be disciplined and take a little bit of risk off the table each year. And as you get to 5 years away from retirement, in our humble opinion, you need to be pretty defensive in how you're managing your assets, because at that point in time, you should be close to saving what you have for retirement, and taking too much risk can completely derail your plans because a major correction will take longer than that 5-year period of time to recover any major losses.
Now, I know there's no one size fits all, but if you're 5 years out of retirement, 20%, 30%, 40% in risk in the stock market, what's your best guess? Again, I know there's no one size fits all, but what would you tell our viewers in general?
If I had to answer that question, if you're in retirement right now, and I had to make a blanket answer for everyone.
5 years away from retirement.
5 years away from retirement, then I would say that you need to have 50% or less of equity exposure. And again, everyone's situation is different, but I believe that if you're carrying more risk than that, then you have, a bigger chance of a major setback that could cause you to not be able to retire on time. And I never want to see anyone in that situation, because I saw it a lot in 2008. People ignored risk. They were close to retiring, and their savings, they lost over a third of it. Seems like almost overnight. And I don't want to see people make that same mistake again.
So that's a great general answer. With the 45 seconds we have left, please tell our viewers, would you change that answer at all now, given where the markets are today? And if so, how?
Well, I've been a big bull here the last few years. And as the markets hit new highs here towards the latter part of 2019, we are telling clients to shave more off. So I'm more defensive now than I have been in a very, very long time, because I think we are closer to a recession than we have been in a while. And if you have cash or a defensive strategy on the sideline, you can buy the market back after we see some type of major dip.
That's an important point. So many people say, I don't want to get out of the market. I don't want to get out of the market. I need an inflation hedge and things like that. And sometimes I just tell them, you do realize you can get back in at a more opportune time. And sometimes people are so brainwashed, if you will, by Wall Street about buy and hold, they never think that they get out and get back in. So anyway, Eddie, thanks so much for being on our show again today.
Thank you very much, Dave.
And you stay with us. We'll be right back here with more coming up in just a minute on the Income Generation. I'd like to thank Eddie Ghabour for joining us today for another episode of the Income Generation. I'd also like to thank you, our new and returning viewers, for sending in your retirement questions. As I noted at the top of the show, education is really my greatest passion in life, whether that means teaching hardworking Americans how to protect their money and meet their goals, or teaching fellow advisors how to put today's complex financial markets in the right perspective for their clients. At the end of the day, however, educating is an ongoing process, as is the process of staying educated. That's true in any field. Doctors, for example, must constantly stay abreast of advances in medicine and technology. For them, the game is always changing. And it is for investors as well. The economy, interest rates, the financial markets, along with things like demographics trends, social trends, politics, are in constant state of flux. That means the answers to certain questions about saving and investing that you get today may not be the right answers for tomorrow. And this underscores just how important it is for everyday investors like you to make a commitment to stay educated and to making sure you have access to reliable, unbiased sources of information. I understand that can be a challenge. And helping you meet that challenge was the very reason I started this show. It's also the reason I've written 3 books so far, why I host a radio show and continue to host educational workshops. Because I'm committed to continuously educating investors over the age of 50 about investing for income and to answer their questions based on the best and most current data available. I hope you're committed to continuously asking questions. Thanks for watching. If you're close to retirement, you really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, it's essential that you stay informed and up to date. And as you know, right here is where you can do it on The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you next week.
Investing for income? The idea has grown in popularity over the last several years due to today's volatile stock market. But if you're at or near retirement age, it's no longer just how much you've saved. It's about maximizing and protecting your life savings while minimizing your risk from market ups and downs. David J. Scranton's new book, The Retirement Income Story, is here to help baby boomers face the challenges of investing in this age of economic uncertainty. Visit theretirementincomstory.com to learn more.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow The Income Generation show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.